Welcome to Cook the Garden Podcast, your weekly audio source for delicious and easy garden fresh recipes and growing tips. I'm your host, Janine Grays. Let's cook the garden. Hey, garden foodies. I can't think of a better way to start the new season off than with podcast co-hosts and food bloggers, Bita Arabian and Bita Nazem Kelley. They both make up the Modern Persian Food Podcast, and they share their unique approach to cooking and eating Persian food. In today's episode, we're going to dive into how they incorporate fresh herbs into Persian cuisine. Plus, they're going to share an amazingly delicious recipe for a traditional Persian soup. And let me tell you guys, I've made it a few times already, and it's definitely hands down a new favorite for me and my family. So I hope you find today's episode just as fun and inspiring as I did. Don't forget, check out the show notes with all of the links to get connected with Bita and Beata on their podcast and their blogs. Now, let's jump right into it. Bita and Beata, welcome to Cook the Garden Podcast.
Yay, thank you so much for having us.
Hi, ladies. It's a pleasure.
So, ladies, before we get started, because we have a lot to talk about, we have a lot of things to get through. But before that, I would love to ask you guys, I've gotten some questions, okay? So I've let my community know, hey, I'm going to be talking to Bita and Beata. What questions do you guys have? And it's so funny because people want to ask, like, well, is that their names? Like, is that a branded thing? Or like, those are really cool names. Like, did they plan that? So, and I'm like, guys, those are their names. But can you both go kind of a little bit into the story of your names and how you guys got together?
Yeah, sure. I think it's part of what brought us together. So I think for myself personally, food has been the conduit and the connector to this culture. I grew up in the Midwest many, many years ago in small towns, and it was rough times in the environment and the relations with Iran. And so I quite quickly assimilated and kind of rejected my culture. So I didn't have anybody around that I knew with my same name. And then later in life, as an adult growing up in California, I started to meet some. And the funny thing is there's a lot of Bitas in the food space. And when I found Bita, Nazem, Kelley, and found out that she's also a recipe developer and in the San Francisco Bay Area, I just had to meet her. And so that's my personal drive for being so excited about meeting Bita. And then when we met in person, it was like a match made in heaven.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really interesting that we both have the same name, although it's spelled differently. So that actually makes it quite convenient in correspondences and in emails and things like that. We know which Bita the people are actually referring to. So that's helpful. But yeah, I didn't actually grow up with a lot of people hearing my name. I didn't hear a lot of other people having my name until I got older. And Bita actually means unique. Means one of a kind, unique. So I really love that actually, because I do think that we each bring our unique perspective to the podcast. I was born in San Francisco. I grew up in the Bay Area, and I actually, different from Bita, I did have a big Persian community around me, a more family community around me. I had aunties and cousins, and there was constantly Persian food being cooked in our house. And I kind of grew up with those sounds and smells and flavors. So I definitely love that. I think at this point of my life, it's more how can I bring those flavors and ingredients to my hybrid family now. My husband is not Persian. My kids are half. I have 2 kids, younger kids. And so it's a matter for me of like, how can I incorporate those flavors so that I can, so that the legacy of the Persian cuisine can live on in my family. And then that's, what we do on the podcast is just try to share information and give confidence to people to be able to use those flavors in their own homes and in their own lives as well.
Yeah, we were a fan of each other's work in the kind of blogging space, and we just joined forces and decided that we could use the podcasting platform to have a wider scope and reach. And it's just been so much fun, as you can relate to. We love podcasting.
That's so awesome. And thank you for sharing that story. I love that you guys came together over, just that bond of just having the same unique name.
Mm-hmm.
Literally. And then you take your strengths and you bring it together and look at what you've created. So it's just absolutely beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. And you guys are so inspiring. I love that you're sharing the culture with other people, not just the Persian community, but people from all over, from all walks of life. I think that's the beauty of what it is that we do as podcasters. So I love what you all are doing.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. So as you know, we have a lot of gardeners in Cook the Garden community. Myself is one of them, but I always love to know from my guests, what are you growing? Do you have gardens? What are you growing? Or what do you plan on growing anytime soon? I know you guys are over on the West Coast. I'm in Florida. And but I do think we're in the similar growing zones. I'm in 9B. But yeah, do you guys have any gardens?
Yeah, I love this question. So I'm blessed with 2 residences, one in Northern California and one in Southern California. So our Northern California home is our home base. And although I don't have a huge garden, I have a garden bed. And it's kind of a 2-tier garden bed. I typically plant more or less the same thing. So right now I have fresh herbs going, the topic of today's conversation, herbs and Persian cuisine. So I love having fresh herbs in the garden. It motivates me to add those extra fresh flavors to dishes because I could just go out there and clip it. I have very strong sunshine, so I would love to hear your strategies, but I'm starting to play with some shade even to protect the more delicate herbs, which we can get into. But I always have tomatoes. I love garden tomatoes. They're extra sweet, and I have memories of gardening with my dad. That's one of the things that we bonded over. I would help him water, and then he'd let me pick the cherry tomatoes off and just eat them right there. And so I always have cherry tomatoes.
Great
now.
Memory.
Now my girls do the same. And I have strawberries going, and then I switch it up from there. I this year have peppers. I have I think I have red bell peppers, and then something that was called lunchbox variety, which I'm kind of not sure what's going to come out, but I'm guessing they're smaller.
Kinds. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In Southern California, we don't have much land. And so I just have succulents. And I am really curious about these modern gardens that I've seen. I saw one at my friend's house. And again, you may know more about this, but hers had lettuce. It's like a stand. And
like a tower garden.
Yeah. And it had like lettuces and herbs, and I was obsessed and fascinated by it. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if it can sustain while I'm not there for more than 2 weeks, but I am really curious about that as an option for a home that doesn't have space for an outdoor garden.
Absolutely.
How about you, Bita June?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I live like right smack in the middle of the city. So we don't have there's like a common backyard, but we don't have a designated area for ourselves. I have a great, beautiful patio. So my garden is really limited to whatever potted herb I get from the grocery store. So I don't grow it myself, but I love to get like basil, like in a little pot. And I put it on the counter, and I love clipping off of it and using it. But I buy fresh herbs like every week. So even though I don't grow it myself, I have them, I buy them. And I actually store them I like to chop off the bottom of it. I wash them up, I chop off the bottom, and I actually put them like in a mason jar or like a glass. And I actually just put them on the counter. I think it's probably better if I put it in the fridge, but I love keeping it on the counter, and it kind of like brings a little bit of life into my kitchen. And then it's also a reminder of like, okay, don't forget to use your cilantro, or don't forget to use, your basil. So I love having it kind of like as its own little focal point of like these little jars of herbs, but I don't actually grow them myself.
Yeah. I have something to add to that when you bring up potted basil. I recently learned, Janine, you might know this trick, but how to propagate basil. So clip it, and you could do this, Bita Jane. You clip it and kind of take off the tiny leaves at the bottom and put it in a small jar of water and wait for it to root. And that one plant can then give birth to many plants. And so I'm so excited. I have 3 right now that are rooting in water. I have yet to plant them in. So then I believe the next step is to then put them in small pots of dirt before then. If you want to transfer them, you can, I guess, when they get to a certain size, but that might be fun for you to do, Bita June.
Does it actually root, or does it, I just feel like when I do that, it kind of just starts rotting on the bottom.
It will actually root. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bita.
Oh, no, please. You're the expert. I'm just starting, but I'm seeing the little strands.
You're starting to see it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You just begin to see them. I think what helps too is I love herbs because you can honestly still grow them indoors as well. You're not, as long as you have it in a place where, you have some sunlight coming in. So if you've got like a window in your kitchen or somewhere you can put them in front of, but as soon as they start to form that root, you could put them in dirt. But I'm like you, I'll just, I'll go out and pick like a bunch of basil, and then I'll just bring it in the house and put it in a mason jar. And that actually prolongs the life a little bit longer than it does when you stick it in a refrigerator.
Yep.
So yeah, I would do that as well, but they're so easy. And, even, if you don't have a lot of space, I've seen some really cute, like herb garden, like indoor herb gardens that you can do. So you can get really creative with it.
Yeah.
And earlier,
I need to do that.
Bita, you mentioned the stand. Check out, I don't know if you've heard. So in my last guest episode with Amy Katz, she actually has one of those. It's a stand, and she talked about how she's growing like all kinds of lettuces in there. And she's actually in California as well. I'm not sure what area anymore, but it's very hot, and sometimes it gets super dry, but check that out because she actually raved about that product.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks great. Bita just shared the picture of it with me, and it looked really great. And you can have so many different things growing in a small space. And it's like, okay, here, let me make a salad of all these different greens I have and herbs and stuff that I have around.
Exactly.
On the topic of propagating, do you think that maybe, do you have any tips for preventing rotting? Maybe the trick is that if you just have one stem, you can manage it and there aren't a lot of small leaves on the bottom.
That's part of the reason when you group them. Oops, sorry, I hit my mic here. When you're grouping them together, it's almost kind of like they start creating gook and bacteria, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But when you have them separated, they can actually thrive a little bit longer like that.
Okay.
So that's the reason why typically that you would want to propagate them in just kind of singular plants, if that makes sense.
Okay. And then maybe also like using like a sharp like cutting utensil to cut them. Does it have to be like a straight cut? Does that make a difference versus just like pinching it off?
It's so funny. And this is just something I've done for the longest, but yeah, I'll use like a little sharp, one of the little like cuticle scissors.
Oh,
And they're like really sharp and small and precise. And that's what I use.
Yeah,
and so
that's probably what I need to use, something like that versus me just like breaking it off with my finger.
Yeah. It's a nice clean cut. But
that probably makes a difference.
Yeah. And who knows, I could be a little bit like extra picky about it, but those little scissors, I just have that like with my planting stuff, and I just pull it out whenever I want to do that. And they come in really handy.
Yeah, I'll report back if I have success. But one thing I did notice is that because they're small, I have to be careful to have the right size jar or receptacle that the stem is actually reaching the water, but not being soaked in it, Right. So you're just kind of like paying a lot of attention to it and treating it like a real baby.
I know, baby. Your herb babies.
Yeah, for sure.
I love it. So as far as Persian cuisine, I've been getting into Persian. There's actually a Persian food truck.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's around here. And they're kind of newer to the area. And oh my goodness, I'm hooked. I'm hooked. But just the Persian cuisine itself, to me, like uses up so many like herbs, like so many fresh produce. And that's why I love it so much. Can you either one of you can kind of chime in on this, but what does the role of like herbs play in the cuisine itself? I mean, it's such a diverse cuisine too. Just from your own, experience, what are, what's the main, role of herbs, and how does it elevate the cuisine?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because herbs play a huge role in Persian cuisine in all forms. I mean, we even have like fresh herbs as like a condiment, kind of, even like you'll have your food and then you'll have there'll be like a small platter of fresh herbs at the table that you kind of use as like a little freshness with each bite that you're eating. So we use the fresh. We have stews that are all just herbs, a bunch of different types of herbs chopped up, fried up, stewed together with meats and beans and things like that, and served over rice. We have dried herbs that we add to like different yogurt dishes or different salads. So we really utilize a lot of fresh herbs. And it's not like, oh, just a little sprig of parsley on your plate. It's like the whole dish is made with a ton of herbs. So it can be kind of labor intensive, because you have to, you get all the fresh herbs if you're going to be growing it or buying it, and you have to wash it and then dry it. So some of these dishes, take a lot of prep and then chopping everything. So it can be a little bit labor intensive, but it's definitely well worth it, because the flavors are so delicious and it brings so much. So I would say that herbs is like one of the biggest foundational elements of Persian food.
Yeah, and to tag on to what you said, Bita June, with the sabzi khordan platter, is what she's talking about, is the fresh herbs that you will almost always see traditionally in a home. If you're there for a dinner party or even in a restaurant, it's typically served on the stem, like not necessarily the way that, we might use it here as a garnish where you trim it off. It's still on the stem, and it's just a variety of fresh herbs, and often served with some feta cheese and some walnuts, maybe some green onions and radishes, ornately cut and decorated, and it can be really beautiful. And the way that it's eaten, and I've had, American friends that will kind of gawk at us the first time that they witness it, but it's just like almost like a cow. I've heard it referenced.
Oh my God.
Because you just eat it like you're just like grazing on it like a salad, basically, eating the whole thing with the stems, full of fiber and nutrition. But like take a bite with your yummy Persian breads and cheese and nuts, and just eat it. So if you get the opportunity, just go for it. It's really delicious, and it just adds, it complements really well and adds an extra layer of freshness to every bite. I'm already hungry.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. Well, I keep thinking that I want to make that, because if you guys follow me on social media, I love making boards But
Mhm.
this would be like,
Yeah.
to me, leveling up. And when you say you're leaving the stems on it, to me, that's even more nutrition, right? Because
Mhm.
you still have like so many nutrients that live in those stems.
Yeah.
So it really, really is just such a beautiful concept to me. And they're gorgeous. Like I saw on your website, I think each of you have that on your websites, right?
Yeah.
At least, yeah. And
Yeah.
so I saw that picture and I'm like, that's just gorgeous. Like, just, walking into a home and just seeing that the layout with the beautiful, variety of herbs and, it's just a beautiful display. And why wouldn't you want to like tear into that? I wouldn't call it grazing like a cow.
I know. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, absolutely. And it actually can be like a very humble dish too, to just have like some warm flatbread with some of the feta cheese and stuffed with all these herbs. So like we're talking about kind of like soft herbs. So like cilantro and parsley, mint, basil, all of these kind of all wrapped up. And, again, just to point out, like complementing some of the Persian foods can be kind of rich, especially if you have like braised meats or like kebabs or something like that. So it does add like a nice level of freshness paired with kind of the heavier, rich foods.
Yeah, yes. That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, and balance. So in old Persian food culture, there's this whole science of balancing your food to help with digestion. Digestion plays a huge role in Persian food culture. And so bringing in the greens and the salad and the sabzi khordan alongside the rich foods, as Bita June was saying, helps to balance and digest your food.
Exactly. No, I think that's such an important point to make because, I grew up in Surinamese, a South American family. And so we eat a lot of fresh as well, like fresh herbs, fresh vegetables, and a lot of pickled vegetables as well.
Yes.
And so the pickled really offsets the heavier, the meats and the braised, meats and all of that stuff. So I can totally relate to what you're saying. And when you think about it, to me, I think it's such a balanced way of eating that, some of society has gotten away from. But I think conversations like this bring it back to, like how we really need to be thinking about, when we're feeding our families and how we're feeding ourselves, balancing it out, and I think the body takes care of the rest type thing. But I love everything you guys are saying.
Yay. Awesome.
So are there any particular, Bita, you talked about earlier, you have these memories with your dad in the garden. Are there any like particular dishes that you all grew up with that are just like staples? These are just staples growing up in a Persian home.
Yeah, I think we have to talk about ash reshte. That's a very iconic, nourishing, delicious soup. And the English way to say it is Persian bean noodle herb soup. It's loaded, nutritious, and you can make it your own. My recipe, I like to use chickpeas, lentils, maybe a white bean. I know Bita June introduced me to using black-eyed peas in it, which is really delicious.
Sounds great.
And all the herbs, green onions, spinach if you want, just loaded. And then there's a special type of noodle, which also has some symbolism to it. It's a really cool soup. Bita June can chime in as well.
Yeah, I think ash reshte is an iconic Persian soup. It's not like a very runny soup. It's a very hearty soup that, as Bita June said, is very nutritious. It has these long noodles in it, flat noodles, similar to like a fettuccine, which I have definitely subbed in when I couldn't get my hands on real Persian noodles. And the noodles, the long noodles kind of represent longevity and like good luck. So we typically have this soup for Persian New Year, which falls on the first day of spring. And it's a great time to have that too, because it has so many herbs and greens in this soup that it's like Persian New Year represents like rebirth and renewal on the first day of spring. So it really kind of, it makes like this a great option to serve on that day. What I like to do is I've been actually for probably like a decade now, is I also make this soup on regular like Western New Year's Day. So January 1st as well. So not only on first day of spring, but I actually make it on New Year's Day. And then that's where I started adding black-eyed peas. So I'm kind of combining a few different cultures, and I serve that on New Year's Day, and I have an open house. So anyone who wants to come by, stop by for a bowl of soup for good luck for the new year. But I definitely grew up eating this soup, and it is so super delicious. So many fresh herbs go into this. And then it can so the soup itself is actually vegan. And then you can add, on top of it, like as a garnish, you can add, like either like yogurt, or there's a product that is called kashk that is like kind of like a byproduct made from yogurt. You can use that or garnish it with like, some fried mint, and also caramelized onions. And so the soup itself has like a beautiful display on the top of it. And then you kind of like dig in, and again, it's super hearty and nutritious, and just like such comfort food for me.
Yeah. I love that you do that, Bita June, that you make, and I've seen pictures of vats, like 3 huge vats of the soup that you have going. And I can just picture enough to share with all your friends. And once upon a time, if you're a recipe developer and you have a site, you sometimes are a slave to Google Analytics. And so at one point, I think I originally had called this soup a Persian detox soup, because it is that, like, it's that good for you. But I also was recently on a panel of health experts on the topic of, is Persian food healthy? And I said yes. I always say yes. And I brought this soup up, and there was a naturalist doctor on the panel who tried to say, well, wait a minute, some people have trouble with noodles and gluten, and maybe they can't digest beans well. And I still say it's so good for you. I mean, lentils are loaded with folic acid, protein, healthy fiber. If you have trouble digesting beans, there's some tips and tricks to soak your beans longer, and I do think that the balance of the beans with the herbs does help with digesting it. So I hope you love it. I heard you're going to make it, Janine.
Oh, yes, I am definitely going to make it. I just ordered my Persian noodles, and they're very long. So do you normally break them in half, or do you keep them long, or, or does it matter? Is it a
it doesn't. It is a preference thing. It doesn't really matter. I think if you look at a traditional soup, the longer the noodle, kind of the nicer it is. You'll notice that when you're cooking. So I usually, if it's a full size noodle, I'll usually break it in half. And then I kind of don't really make it smaller than that. But you'll notice that when you're actually stirring the pot, once the noodles are actually in there, they have a tendency to break a little bit too. So you kind of add the noodles like close to the end, and then just kind of just have a gentle hand when you're stirring, so that you don't like further break them too small.
Okay.
This is another thing that Bita June and I have in common, is how much we love this soup. I think we both are obsessed with the soup. Sometimes I will make it. It's not hard, you guys. You really should try. Sometimes I'll just do this modern bastardized version where I'll just do the beans, a variety of beans. And then my favorite part of this soup is I love the fried onion, dried mint topping with turmeric. It adds so much flavor with the turmeric. And so sometimes I'll just have the beans around and I'll mix them together and then fry up the onions, turmeric, and mint and just enjoy it, that way. But I can handle beans. My system's used to it. So I don't know about, the greater audience with beans.
Yeah. And you know what? I love this soup. I know I'm really going to love it after I make it because you guys make it sound so amazing. But it sounds like it's really versatile. Like you can do so much with it.
Yeah.
And I love meals like that. Do you guys ever find yourself making a really large batch and freezing? Does it freeze really well?
Yeah, I don't have experience freezing it. I have some shortcuts for making it, but have you ever frozen it, Beata?
Yeah. I mean, I do because, like you pointed out, I do make like 4 big pots for New Year's Day. So, if we don't go through all of that, then I do end up freezing it. And I haven't had a problem with it. So you just kind of I'll put it in like either like a zip top bag to have it like flat or like in a like, honestly, like an old yogurt container or something like that, which is kind of like funny. You'll see in Persian homes, like old yogurt containers, like being reused, So I'll put it in that and just leave it. Yeah, exactly. Making use of not being wasteful and things. So then, you just let it thaw out like in the refrigerator for like a day or so, and then just warm it up gently. Some tips and tricks to making it. I mean, I think that Beata can chime in here in a second too. So one tip I have, I mean, if we're talking about just like herbs and preserving herbs and things like that, one thing that I do that the topic of a freezer came up is, when I get a bunch of herbs and I have 2 different, if I'm not going to use all of it, or sometimes I just need like the leaves of like my cilantro, for example, in the greater good of like not being wasteful and things like that, what I'll do is I'll wash the rest of the herbs and the stalks and the stems, and I'll wash them and I'll chop it up. And I'll chop them up, and then I'll put it in a zip top bag and put it in the freezer. And then the next time I have it, I just kind of add to it. So like by the time I'm ready to make ash ishte, I have a ton of herbs I'm ready to just dump in the pot. And that's a huge shortcut. I also do use frozen spinach because it's easy to have in the freezer. So then I'll just throw that in to the soup as well. If you have fresh, even better. But, I love this soup, and I try to limit the barriers for me to prevent making it. So like, I'll throw frozen spinach. I'll use canned beans. I'll use these herbs that I have stocked up, So those are some of my tips to like kind of make it happen and also not being wasteful.
Yeah. Can we list off the herbs? I think we haven't quite done that yet, but the ones that we most commonly use and also the ones we use in this soup.
Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I could start with what I have in my garden. I have basil in my garden. I have cilantro. I have parsley. In addition to that, mint. I definitely have mint. That's a big one. And then tarragon is one commonly used in Persian cuisine. Did I forget any, Beata?
You could also, you had referenced green onion, or also leeks are really great for this soup as well. I don't know if that falls into the herb category or not, but definitely you can use all of the leek, and that's a great way to use it.
And they're really easy to grow too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, they're really easy to grow. So, wow.
I haven't grown leeks yet. Okay, now I'm inspired. Give it a try. Can Beata do it in a pot?
You can absolutely do them in a pot. Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's where I have it now. I have actually, it's more of like a grow bag, but leeks grow really well in containers and pots. So definitely give it a try. They're really easy, and I love leeks. So
on the topic of, I'm not sure what the category is, bulb vegetables, I guess. Is that what a leek is? I also put garlic. I love the topping of the, like I said, the onion, turmeric, dried mint and I put garlic in there too.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So it can be, and to your report, Janae, that it can really kind of be customized really. If you want heavier spinach, or if you want less beans and more noodles, you can do whatever you can do whatever you want. I promise you it'll be delicious. Oh, and onions are a big part of it. So like it starts out with like a base of like caramelized onions, and caramelized more or less like brown, golden caramelized. You don't have to like cut it so cook it so hard that it's like, disintegrating. But you just start off with like a base of the onions and adding some turmeric to it. I like to then fry some of the herbs a little bit gently before we kind of take the next steps.
Yeah. And frying onions and turmeric is the foundation for many, many Persian dishes. And in fact, if you don't know what to cook and you just get that going, your house is going to start smelling so delicious. I think you could just almost mix anything together with that and have a delicious
meal. So the combination of the onion and the turmeric.
Mm-hmm. It smells so good. It's that's my childhood memory.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I remember just waking up early or waking up at my parents' house. And then you have that smell of like the onions caramelizing and, when she adds turmeric to it. And then you knew that it was like either guests are coming or it's like food is being prepared. So it's always a very comfort scent for me.
Oh, and it's making me more and more hungry, but that's the smell of home. And and you wake up to it because it's like, Persian foods can be labor intensive. Bita, June, and I try really hard to make shortcuts and make it accessible to everyone with busy lives and schedules. But you in a Persian family, you wake up to that smell and you're home and you're like, okay, I'm home.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that you recognize that, the cuisine itself, the traditional cuisine can be a little bit labor intensive. And sometimes that might be scary for people or like if you've got a job and you're balancing kids. So I love that you guys are making it approachable and then just also offering like, tips and tricks of, maybe some shortcuts because, hey, we could all use some shortcuts, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then just a quick note on it too. You don't have to make it all at once either. Like you can chop up your onion and saute it and then just kind of like, just put it in a jar in the fridge and then pick it up like, and then add it to your pot like the next day or something so that you don't have to cook from start to finish all at once,
That's a great tip.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And like, I know like Bita June like cooks her beans separate. So like she could have her beans already done and then the onions are already done. And then like pulling it together at that point, it could be like really easy,
Right.
Yeah. Batch cooking helps a lot when you're busy, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It really does. It really does. So you guys are in the thick of it. You've got this podcast going. Can you share, or are there any like innovative or upcoming trends in the Persian food world? Are there any like, trendy things happening? What's going on with that?
I love it. This is such a great question because we actually have a couple of summer series coming where we're featuring food trucks like the one you mentioned throughout the US and Persian fast food. So we feel like Persian food is just on the cusp and the verge of really spreading, which is just such a dream. And not only in the fast food and food truck arena, but also in the food delivery space. So Bita, June, and I have been very grateful to now be able to act as consultants to a couple of meal delivery services. Oh my
gosh, that's huge, guys. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. So to Bita's point, it's like, having Persian food in more places, having it more accessible to people via food truck, via fast food, via home delivery. That's definitely a trend. I think that a few more trends that I was just thinking about is I think a lot of hybrid, like Persian hybrid offerings is, I would say, like as a kind of innovative way that we see that like Persian and Mexican food combination, trying to like kind of merge some cultural foods. And then also I would think that one thing that is kind of like emerging right now is it's interesting, but actually old classic recipes, like old school, humble type of going back to like a traditional old school, like, like an abgusht, which is like a very humble soup that with like some like lamb bones and like beans, again, served with fresh herbs and onion and those pickled vegetables that you kind of were talking about. So like kind of like these very classic old school recipes. If I had to like think and like look in the future, I think those are really going to kind of make a comeback.
I hope
Ooh.
you're right, because I grew up with that soup that you're just talking about. That's a very comforting soup. And if I could go somewhere and get that, it would be incredible.
Yeah.
It's always the simple things, right? The simple meals growing up. I've had, I grew up on some really simple and humble meals, but I'm telling you, I will never forget those, those recipes because they were just so comforting and so familiar. And it takes me back, to home. So I can totally resonate with what you're saying there. But thank you for sharing some of those emerging trends. Go ahead, Bita. You had something?
Janine, and am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes.
Janine, I think I might have said it wrong previously.
Oh, that's okay.
So excuse me for that.
No, you're good. You're good.
I wanted to hear what herbs you like to grow and what you have going. And if you have any tips about taking care of the delicate ones, I'm thinking cilantro is very delicate, as well as certain parsleys.
Yes. Yeah. So right now I have growing cilantro. I've got basil. I've got, oh goodness. I've got some edible flowers also, some lavender. Goodness, I've got a borage. I've got nasturtiums in there.
You have a borage. Oh, that's actually.
Yes.
What is that? Educate me.
I don't know exactly what it is, but I do know that it's an herb that they would use in like more northern Iran. I've heard that like along kind of like the Caspian Sea region, that it's like one of those herbs that you can't really find here, is what my understanding was.
It's a beautiful like blue flower color.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's fully edible and it's delicious. And I didn't realize that it's used very much in Iranian dishes.
Yeah, I've never tasted it. I've never had it, but I've heard about it, and I think it pairs really well with seafood.
It does, and it's delightful. So
and you can make a tea out of it too. I think you
can make a tea out of it as well. I actually had the seeds for those. So they're still really small. They're babies, but I'm definitely looking forward to those growing in more. And I'm trying to think of rosemary, going back to the herbs, rosemary. I always have rosemary. Parsley is another one I always have. I'm always growing that. I don't have as much right now because it's so hot and sweltering. I actually look forward to like the fall. So like August, September is when I really, really start, like going crazy. And then of course I've got my fruit trees in the backyard. But I just love having herbs on hand because there's nothing greater than being able to go like in your patio or, reach over on the counter and grab that fresh, bush of, basil or parsley. But I cook daily with herbs, and I had to because I was spending so much in the grocery store. They're very expensive now. So, it's just easier for me to be able to grow them, on my own. And yeah, so that's what I have going on right now.
That sounds great. So given the heat, then, are you doing a little bit more of the indoor pots? Have you tried any of these shades to help with the heat and the sun burning out your herbs?
Yeah, so I've tried some of the shade cloths. So I haven't tried them for my herbs, but I have tried them in my beds. And they could be helpful. I've actually situated my beds now where they're or my herbs where they're in a more shaded area. So I have them actually in my covered patio area. So they get plenty of sun, but they also get some shade, which helps a lot because that sun is it's brutal. So they've been really thriving with that. And I have all of my herbs in containers, in pots. I don't have any right now in my beds. Like they're all, because I keep them easy access. So I can, while I'm cooking, run out there to my patio and pick a few fresh ones. So that's the thinking in that, but they're also good to plant, with with other, with your vegetables. There are certain herbs that work really well if you're growing other types of vegetables. Like some of them may tend to, keep the pests away.
Good.
Some of them really work well with other vegetables. So it's really good. So I do want to incorporate more herbs in my beds eventually.
Okay. Yeah, this might not be relevant since you have them in pots, both of you right now, but worth mentioning is that there are some invasive herbs. I don't think you're growing mint right now, but you said rosemary.
Right,
yeah, the mint takes over, man. So you got to stay on
top.
You have to stay on top of it and actually pull it out. I'm constantly pulling it out so that it's not hogging all the space and water from everything else. Mm-hmm. But I've heard that I just planted rosemary. I don't typically do that. I heard rosemary sometimes does the same.
They do. And you're right. That's why I do keep a lot of it in the pots. Typically herb would be in a pot of its, or mint would be in a pot of its own, because it really does spread. And that's, I learned the hard way a few years ago, and it was just so hard. I mean, what's the worst? I mean, it's mint. Mint's fantastic, but it really did take over everything. But
in fact, I have these old memories. My dad's brother, my uncle Mirza in Michigan, his gardens were kind of wild, and his landscape style was just kind of like a let it grow. Yeah. And the mint, I mean, he had like a mint in grass. It was it was their grass. It was everywhere. But it was really sweet because he was actually the one who cooked in that family. And so,
that's awesome. Yeah. But and so I also, I incorporate my herbs. I freeze them.
Okay.
I will infuse my oils. So I'm known to put my fresh herbs, my rosemary, or just whatever I have, my, parsleys. And I will infuse my olive oil. I also use a lot of avocado oil. So I'll infuse that. I'll make herb bombs with it and put them in little ice cube trays and put them in a freezer.
I love that.
Those
you could do
great.
That with your pretty edible flowers too.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you have. That's such a pretty presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can freeze, make little ice cubes with the pretty flowers in there and put them in your drinks and your cocktails. You can get really creative with it. That's for sure.
Sounds so pretty.
Well, this is so much fun, guys. I'm having so much fun with you all. Before we wrap it up, though, I want to ask you guys, Bita, you alluded to it earlier. You have some fun projects coming up with the consulting. Any other projects or things you guys have going on with the podcast or even on your blogs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the consulting thing is definitely kind of taking a little bit of center stage right now as we're kind of working closely, finalizing a menu with a current company that we're working with. Bita, as you mentioned, we have a series on up and coming, about getting Persian food in unexpected places like food trucks or in fast food areas. And another series that we are in right now is a cookbook series. And that's where we're featuring both up and coming authors and also established authors who have come out with new Persian cookbooks specifically. So we're interviewing them and getting deep diving into reading these really beautiful cookbooks. And we're, getting ready for back to school, trying to figure out, the next season and just getting our episodes lined up. So we're just kind of just enjoying what we're doing, spreading the flavors of Persian cuisine and making it accessible to people and encouraging people to incorporate those flavors. And, we mentioned some of the stews, but I just wanted to point out, that so many of the foods of Persian foods feature vegetables like eggplant and celery and okra. So when you think of so people may think Persian food may automatically just think of kebabs or something like that or meats, but there are so many vegetables that it's it really showcases vegetables in these different stews. So I encourage everyone to try them out. A new way to kind of use the vegetables you have and the herbs that you have in your garden. and to try it out and let us know, if you try a recipe. I can't wait to see your ashe when you make it. But if your listeners want to try some recipes, we'd love to see it. We'd love to share that with our followers as well to kind of just amplify it.
Yeah, of course. And so for those of you listening, I will definitely include the link to that delicious soup recipe. And I'll be linking some other really fun recipes and resources. All of the content that Bita and Beata produce is just absolutely fantastic and so approachable. So I'll be including all of their links below. But how can you guys just share real quick, how can folks connect with you on your blogs or on the podcast? How can we get in touch with you guys?
We're Modern Persian Food everywhere. So at Modern Persian Food on Instagram, and small presence on TikTok, just starting over there. But
awesome.
Our website is also Modern Persian Food. And we hope you hop over. We have a huge variety of listeners, and we love that. We have all walks of life, that not just Persians and Iranians, but Americans and beyond, that just want to offer a unique cuisine and something different. So hop on over. Thank you so much for having us, Janine, and inviting us on your show. It's been really fun.
Oh, it was all my pleasure. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to just catch up with me and share with our audience and with our community. I think we have similar, communities of folks who can really appreciate unique and different cuisines and different cultures. That's what it's all about, and learning from each other. So you guys are doing fantastic work, and I'm so grateful to you both for just joining me today. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was great to be here. Great to learn more from you. So thanks again. And we look forward to the next time.
Till next time, guys. Take care.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's Cook the Garden. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. As a new podcast, it really helps to add value while growing our awesome community. As always, I really appreciate it. Until next time, friends, keep slaying those garden fresh recipes.